So we're down to the last session, and we've spoken a lot about capturing attention. We've looked at ways of measuring attention, but now the reality is when you finally got your ad in front of somebody, how do you keep that attention? And so we've brought together 4 of the finest minds again to help us to better understand how to create attention magnets. Now, rather than clap and applaud them onto stage, I'm going to ask everyone to do something slightly different. So bear with me, and I'm sorry. Please, can you all take your phones out? Please don't take a picture of me. You can if you want to. Now, turn on the torch. Hold it above your head. And as our panelists walk on, start to wave it, please. Come on, up you come, panelists.
Quite the rock star experience up here. Oh, it's a bit sad that ended. Oh, it's really enjoying my misspent youth there. Right, hello, and thank you for joining us for the last session of today. My name is Faye Liddle-Moore, and I head up our brand studio. In just a second, I'm going to introduce the panellists. Really excited about this and to have you all here. This session, I think, is the missing piece, and I think, Tan, you mentioned earlier, the creative piece is really having tangible pre-points when everyone gathers around the table, when you're thinking about brand outcomes and building something that's meaningful and is going to get the type of attention that you need. So we're going to get into it, and I'm super excited. So first of all, can you introduce yourselves and give us an example of some creativity that got your attention recently, made you pause, even maybe act? Dom.
Hello. I'm Dom from Kantar, and recently I would sort of say McDonald's eyebrows. I mean, that isn't the advertising sphere, but a bit of creativity that stayed with me. 2 bits of creativity that stayed with me that aren't that recent. One, Glastonbury. What an amazing thing to come up with, the idea of Glastonbury. And secondly, the Eden Project, right, back from the 1990s, taking a chalk pit in Cornwall and turning it into a world extravaganza, and it's an experiential masterpiece. So I think creativity can kind of come from anywhere, and advertising is a wonderful forum for it, but it doesn't have to just be limited to advertising.
Nice. Deirdre?
Hi, I'm Deirdre Tippen. I'm from 3 UK. I've been there for about 18 months, but have many years in telco. So that's kind of the area I kind of know a lot about. The piece of creativity I've picked on is not actually that recent, but it's one that's stuck with me for quite a while, and it's the This Girl Can campaign. And what I loved about that is the fact that it showed real people in real situations trying to be the best version of themselves that they can be and have fun while doing it. And being a mother of 2 daughters, I thought that was really important. And also a person that, doesn't look like Cindy Crawford. It's really important that, people are represented in a real way. And I just thought it was fabulous. And it just brought joy to watch. So that was one that stood out for me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Orlando. I'm from System 1. I'm going to pick the Warburton's campaign, which I think is very entertaining, particularly the recent one with Samuel L. Jackson. What I like about it is the way that it's a kind of long-running device that, a new person comes in, a celebrity comes in and pitches an idea for an ad. This one's slightly a twist on that. But it's really very good because it's fun and it has this long-running device and it shows you how to use celebrity, which is to get them to do their turn for you. And that's what they do brilliantly.
Thank you. Arjoon.
Hi, I'm Arjoon. I work up at General Mills. I've been there for 8 years. I've worked across a variety of marketing roles in UK, Europe, and now international. I suppose the creative platform that has always resonated with me and continues to do so is Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. And again, kudos to that for something that is deeply insightful, but also increasingly consistent. Yet, there's always a narrative of freshness that comes in. So it unfailingly works.
Nice. Well, one of the things that strikes me with all of those examples that I didn't know what you're all going to say, but none of them sort of happened yesterday. These are all campaigns that have either had a kind of theme established over several years or something that sticks with us from our youth or something like that. And I think if someone was planning and buying those campaigns on today's digital world and the channels that are now available, maybe we'd feel a bit differently about them. So I think we heard from Peter before about what attention span looks like in the here and now. Alex, our CRO, started by saying, the average screen time for an American is 10 hours every day. So in the here and now, what does it actually mean to capture and keep attention? And is all attention equal? Orlando, come to you first.
I think when you're looking at things from a creative perspective, as I do really, I've been looking at the work of Ian McGilchrist, who's a brilliant psychologist, psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and I think he makes it pretty clear to understand how you might go about that, at least I think so anyway. He talks about there being two different types of attention, this sort of broad beam attention, which is always on, so us being aware of things that are happening just slightly off stage over there, maybe. And then there's this sort of narrow beam attention, which is, focused attention, often quite close up. You see this in people, you see it in mammals, you see it in birds. And it's sort of, one type of attention, the broad beam attention, is making sure that we're not getting eaten, whilst the other one is focusing on what we're going to eat ourselves, So there are these two different types of attention, broad and narrow beam attention. And when you look at what the broad beam attention is interested in, and it's the right hemisphere of the brain that's interested in this and that presents the world to us, it's understanding context, social context, the living. It deals with lived time, with narrative, with music. It understands things on two levels, so it can understand metaphor and it can understand humor. And then the left hemisphere is really not very good at doing any of those things. And the narrow beam attention that's, sort of a bit more predatory, if you like, that's close up, tends to flatten things, so it sees things as flat. It's more interested in language, the left hemisphere, deals with tools. And it's can't really deal with lived time, so you get these sort of short, sharp cuts. So it's like railway tracks, sleepers on a railway track that just hit you. That's how the left hemisphere sees things, and it fixes things. So when you look at these two types of attention, you find that that they look a bit like the two sort of dispositions, the two schools of advertising that have always kind of existed, going back 100, 150 years. One that is more direct, and one that is more oblique and holistic and charms through an emotional appeal, through character, through people, through dialogue, through humour. And that's indeed what we find when we look at the ability of different types of advertising to generate emotional response. So if you're looking to brand build, then you need sort of advertising that often involves people, characters, music, humour, metaphor, where people join the dots themselves and put things into memory. And emotion goes into helps to go to things in memory as well. All those things drive emotion as well as this broad beam attention. And then you've got this narrow beam attention, which so features like those short, sharp cuts, the words on the screen, the rhythmic soundtracks, all of those things. Those drive very direct effects. A short term, getting to a website, pushing people towards downloading an app. Very different kind of effects from the sort of broad beam advertising of the right hemisphere.
Yeah, and you talk about the two schools there, the brand building, the brand performance. And I think that's a theme that came up in the agency provocation session. You're really thinking about how brand building is affected by attention metrics. And I'd love to hear from both Deirdre and Arjoon, when it comes to brand building and brand performance, how differently do you approach creative messaging for those particular schools? Whoever wants to go. Deirdre.
I'll go. So we use quite different creative for brand building and performance. And it's because we're trying to be single-minded when we're trying to sell. We want people to stay on message and understand exactly what it is that we're trying to do. Also, the industry I'm in, it's highly competitive. It's become a utility, so there's less and less between us. I think it's a really interesting dilemma that we have at the moment internally, because we're trying to make sure we stand for something and people understand what that is. We've a way to go, if we're honest, and that's what we're having major discussions about right now for next year. But I also think at the heart of it, though, no consumer, and I know we're not really normal because we don't look at things like normal people. We just don't. It's because of the industry we're in. But customers don't sit at home with one hat on going, oh, I'm going to look at this because it's a brand ad, and then I'm going to look at this ad in a different way because it's a performance ad. They just don't. But I also think performance is often seen as like the poor relation, that it's a bit down and dirty. It's very price driven and outcome driven. But actually, if you do it right, and it doesn't have to be overly fancy, it can be really effective at driving brand metrics as well. So DRTV, for example, a recent campaign I've done, hugely drove consideration where we weren't expecting it. It had a good ROI, it drove gross ads, but it actually drove consideration because actually from a brand recognition and linkage point of view, it scored really highly. We had the right colour, we had a good audio, we had a mnemonic at the end, so it all linked up to what the brand was, and that's really important.
What was that formula again?
Oh God! Don't ask me to repeat
Colour,
it.
logo.
It's audio and visual cues that just remind people of what it is. But yes, but it evolves and it changes. And sorry, somebody said earlier on a panel, which I think is really important, is context. So what you do on TV is different to what you do in social, which is different to what you do in digital platforms, and that can be lost because you're trying to have matching luggage. And I don't think we need to do that.
Yeah, matching luggage kills campaigns. I mean, all of our Kantar data shows that when you customise to platform, it increases effectiveness by about 60%. So it's got to be integrated, true to the brand, true to the campaign, but it's got to be customised according to the context and the platform and the format within the platform as well. So violently agree with that. And
and Arjoon, obviously with brand building, we're really thinking about often making a lasting impact. So for General Mills, it's not about just buying a product now, it's making it a staple in the cupboard, being something you continue to buy through your lifetime. What are the kind of considerations that General Mills have for making lasting impact when it comes to creative?
I mean, we obviously have our internal frameworks, and recently, we've been through this with the organization, but again, it's a framework we call that is kind of focused on three big things, which is relevance, and that's how do you make it really relevant to their lives. I think the second thing when it comes to all things brand building is the emotional response. That is obvious, but within that, I think there are two bits that we really dial up. One of which is personal, because it's how do you make it as personal as you can, because our brains are hardwired to respond to some things that are personal, what you call the cocktail party effect. You're talking in a party and your ears perk up no matter how noisy it is if you hear someone's voice. And the second piece in terms of really getting attention or garnering attention is surprise. And the formula that we sort of try and apply to surprise is, surprise works if, again, the brain is hardwired to react to something that is not quite normal, and within that is it violating expectations, physical or otherwise, and secondly, is it a contrast effect to what is a current context? So I'd say, and finally, of course, I think where we're getting more and more obsessive is distinctiveness, and making sure that we are our distinct memory codes are coming to life more and more. So specific to, say, a Häagen-Dazs, whether it's the color codes of burgundy, whether it's the cartouche, when we talk about the old El Paso, making sure we've got color codes like red, the roof, family, all of that, meal times. We're just getting a lot more bullseye on this. Yeah. And I will say, it eventually is about consistency. We're constantly chopping and changing. We're trying to get a lot more disciplined in terms of making sure our creative is playing the longer game.
So I definitely want to come back to a predictive approach to creative, because I think it maybe stems into another theme that I really want to touch base on. But just going back a little bit to context, Dom, and what you were saying about how important that is. Essentially, brands are connected to audiences, and advertising is that link. How important is context when it comes to creative consideration?
So Oxford side business schools has done some meta-analysis of campaigns over the last 40 years, and it shows that essentially campaigns are about half the sales elasticity, or the sales response per advertising impression is basically halved over the last 40 years. One of the reasons for that is creative quality, another is media fragmentation. And so what we see is that the importance from our Kantar cross-media database, very exciting, shows...
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Essentially shows that the importance of synergy, campaign synergies across different platforms has doubled in importance over the last 12 years. And that's because of media fragmentation. So it's become more, to your point about context, it's more important than ever to be consistent and to have that glue across your campaign. But that doesn't mean matching luggage. It means you've got to be consistently different. All of our data shows that difference, or the perception of difference, is one of the biggest drivers of creative effectiveness and commercial outcomes in terms of ROMI. And the challenge is to have that consistent difference in a way which flexes and breathes across different contexts and environments, so that frankly you're not boring the pants off your audience, right? Because you're competing with pop culture. You're not competing just with other ad campaigns. It's always been the case. It's not a new thing, what we see time and again is wind tunnel creativity. You remember in the 1960s, cars were cool. You'd have a Corvette with their Stingray style sort of fins, and creativity is a bit the same. And suddenly, when wind tunnels came in, cars start to look the same. And it's the same with creativity. And if you don't have that sort of consistent difference done in your own way as a brand, then you're essentially doing yourself a ROMI disservice. You'll fail hard and fast.
I'd agree with that. I was just going to say that consistency, a bit like symmetry in art. We haven't talked much about art here, have we? Is an enemy of movement. So one of the ways to create a campaign that's consistent is to have a character that lives, in it. So I call them a fluent device. So a character like the meerkats, for instance, that's consistent, but actually appeals to the broad beam attention of the right hemisphere, and is interesting, and does things, and surprises. And to your point, Arjoon, you were talking about the extraordinary, something emerging from the scene type thing. We found that again and again to be, the sort of thing that drives attention and emotional response in video, online video, but also TV. And just one artistic principle, very briefly, if you'll allow me. So in the 17th century in Italy, there was this way of thinking about art where they would show people at a moment, at a sort of turning point, and where the hero's luck was changing. And they would reveal emotion through the body, through the face, and at the most heightened emotional moment. And it was called moto e azione, moto from movere, to move, and azione, sort of the actions that transpire at that point. And if you look back at some of the great ads from CDP in the 1970s, so Hamlet cigars, for instance, if any of you remember those, some of the Heineken ads as well, the water at the Yorker doesn't taste like watered water. And, and that change, that transformation, that moment, when you reveal an insight of some kind, those artists believed at the same time you're also going to amplify the emotional response. So an artistic principle that actually works really well in advertising too, and that helps to, I suppose, make sure that you're owning that kind of narrative.
So owning the narrative, surprising, but in a good way. I think we're going back to something Anthony said earlier, one of the Telegraph's principles, which was engage, don't enrage. There's lots of things that we can build upon, attention indicators for creative. And I want to come back to that subject of being predictive. So understanding if a certain length of video is going to get the business outcome that you want, understanding that audio teamed with a certain colour. So there's loads to build on. But the more that we get predictive, are we becoming more predictable? How much can a brand use to be high-performing as a creative, but still maintaining some sort of authenticity?
So I had one bit of advice for everyone. It would just be funny. Honestly, lighten up. Honestly, but by far, it's the biggest predictor. More so than I know we've talked a lot about attention. Actually, emotion has about double the impact of attention on value market share predictions based on our modelling, at least. And it's just it's creative heroin, okay, or creative crack, right? If you can make people smile, create a feel-good emotion, and link it to your brand. We call it the creative magnifier. 5%. If you do that in 5%, it has 45% of outcome on outcomes. That's right. So don't underestimate the power of simply making people smile and the feel-good factor.
There was a really good paper a couple of years ago all about the rise of sadvertising, which great pun, first of all, but secondly, it was everywhere. It was about making people feel, but it was heavy. And
But it's really, so we see humour has declined, humour has basically halved over the last 20 years in advertising, according to our global database. And humour in digital is about half that of TV, and it's declining too. So there's some burning platforms, and everyone in this room, creative media planners, strategists, clients, we're all responsible. We're all responsible. We overthink stuff. Listen to your gut. Allow people the freedom to create, to be creative with format, to be creative with campaigns, with executions, and just lighten the hell up.
We need the play zone, right? Where's Peter?
Yeah, it is the play zone, right?
Yeah,
But the data shows it. It's not just my opinion. The data consistently shows it. Our data, your data, other people's data.
Don't you think, though, that stems from short-termism in a way, though? Because we're always chasing the quarter, the year results, that we kind of lose sight of that longer view and that longer terminal. And I think it's harder to get buy-in for that. I completely agree with you. But another point is the linkage to the brand is really important, because just being funny for funny's sake can fall in its face.
Totally agree.
Arjoon, obviously, some great brands at General Mills. I'm not going to ask you to be funny, but can you, on the spot, give us a joke. No. Can you think of an example where you guys have tried to employ any of this, and how has that worked in terms of getting the right attention?
I think the big discussion we tend to have is it something that is truly creatively ownable to us, right? I think that's the starting point. Like, being funny for the sake of being funny is great. And then to your point, it's about linkage. Like, as we think about storytelling, are we having main character energy, to use a very pop culture phrase? Is that something we can really do before we, go down the humor path? Is where we would genuinely challenge ourselves. So again, when it comes to emotion, I guess there are two things in terms of, hey, what's the range of emotion you want to go down? Because is it, do you want to make them smile? Do you want to make them crack up? And then finally, are you going to be memorable for it, right? Because the problem with a lot of really funny ads or creative pieces is the attribution. Like, they don't remember you. So you got on this path and you do all of it, but it's not serving your brand. So I guess it boils down to the storytelling and the narratives. And is that something that can truly be creatively ownable by us and our right to play in that field?
Nice. We are at time. Can I have one more question? Okay, good. So we also are in the very lovely position that this is the last question of the day. So it's going to be more linked to the theme of attention, but you can be as creative as you like. There you go, segue. We're going to give each of you 30 seconds. If there's one thing that you can impart to the audience as a takeaway, your key takeaway about attention in our industry today, what would it be? Dom?
Don't think, link. We've talked about linked creativity. Our methodology is called LINK for a good reason. Link to emotion, link to your brand, link to popular culture, because consumers don't care about your brand. So you've got to link it in a way which is relevant to real people. Start with them, not with you.
Great. Deirdre?
Context. So the environment you're in and the format you're in, make sure it's bespoke and it works as best it can.
Okay, Orlando?
It's just that something that Bill Bernbach said about attention and storytelling, and it was that make sure that the device or the idea that captures attention also tells the story.
Hopefully that's what we've done today, Arjun.
I believe it was Einstein that said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns from it. He who doesn't pays for it. So, this really is about, being stable on strategy and fresh on execution. Just be consistent, put it out there, and, you'll probably start to see the effects. That's certainly something we're starting to believe in more and more. So compound interest, guys.
Thank you all. Round of applause for the panel.